sky's not blue.
You need to understand that when the time comes, I'm going to be taking over.
Welcome back to the Cult House Podcast. I'm your host, the Scholar of Spite and the Saturday Night Delight, Roger Riddell. Joining me today, she is the senior editor at IDW and has previously worked for Image, Valiant, and Marvel, Heather Antos. How are you doing today, Heather?
I'm tired. It's a holiday week and I don't know what day it is.
I've had trouble figuring out what day it is a lot ever since the pandemic happened.
Sure,
and,
yeah. Yeah, no, that's very, very valid. Yeah, I have, and I'm like surrounded by calendars, like just constantly everywhere. I don't know.
Yeah, like I've loved working from home for like the last 2.5 years, but at the
Yeah.
same time, when your surrounding is the same every day, it's hard to figure out which day is which.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I do it by what days I live with my partner and what days he's home, because he only goes into the office like every other day. So that's my like kind of gauge. But again, it's a holiday week, so everything's thrown to shambles. Who knows? I declare every day Friday. It's better that way.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to live at all.
I don't think so, no.
So yeah, I guess just right off the bat, the best place to start would probably be your origin story and how you broke into comics. Because I've talked to Jay Leaston before about the artist side of that, and that's always been kind of interesting to me, because like one thing that he has mentioned to me several times is that a lot of it on the creative end of things is always just it comes down to luck. Like you might have an art style that's not in at a certain time, or there's just like little things that aren't exactly like fine-tuned to that yet. But on the editor side, that part's always been interesting to me, because there's always people who are like, why can't I get this job? How did this person get it? And I don't think that it's like this whole, I guess, sort of like secret handshake society that a lot of people try to make it out to be.
Yeah, the quote unquote whisper network. No, I mean, Jay, I love Jay. I've worked with Jay a lot. I'm actually working with him on a book with Saladin Ahmed right now, Terror War, on Saladin's Substack. Check it out. Anyways, I always view luck as being prepared when opportunity strikes. If you get you're not going to get a job writing Batman or drawing Batman unless like you can write or you can draw, right? But there's a lot of things that creators can do to get to make sure they're prepared when opportunity strikes. But that's a conversation we can have, later on if we like. But for editorial, it's no different than anything else in life. There's no, like being a writer or an artist, there's no real true way to break in. I know a lot of people are always like, oh my God, what's the magic way, right? Like, how do I get the fast track to working on Star Wars? And when you find it, let me know. But a lot of, I will say, I definitely broke in editorially, probably a much more, at the time, unconventional way. My first publishing house gig was for Marvel. I got hired by Marvel, but before that I did self-publishing and creator owned. But most assistant editors, when they get hired by your Marvels, your DCs, Dark Horses, whatever, they start because they're interns. They get an internship and through college credit, and when they're looking for assistant editors, you know, interns are usually the first people they reach out to. Who did we like as an intern? Who did a good job shredding paper for us? We will hire them. I always felt bad because that's mostly what the interns did, is they shredded paper. It's not all what it's chalked up to be, folks. But for me, when I was starting to explore what would working in comics professionally look like for me, I had already finished college. I had studied to work in film and theater professionally. I had been doing that all throughout college, and naturally, like, is the wise decision for everyone. My senior year, I decided, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Screw everything I've spent my whole life preparing for. Let's throw that all away and pursue something else. And one of my friends had, you know, mentioned to me, well, you like comics, why don't you just do that? You know, let's just go to the comics tree and pick off a job, right? I had grown up in a town where we didn't have a local comic shop. You know, it was really small. I had read comics, but I had never really, you know, considered that as a career path. You know, a career day at school, you don't have, you know, Dan Slott's not coming into every classroom to talk about writing Spider-Man, right? And so I didn't really know that was an option. And so when I began researching what opportunities there might be, you know, well, I know about writers, and I like to write. I'm pretty good at writing, but I don't want to do that. Oh, there's the artist, you know, well, I like to draw and I'm pretty good at drawing, but I really don't want to do that. But there was this role, you know, editor on every single book that I read. And I happened to notice that a lot of the same comics that I read had the same editors on them. So, you know, for instance, a lot of the Marvel comics that I was reading, Jordan White was the editor. A lot of the DC comics that I was reading that I liked had Mike Mertz as an editor. And I thought that was really interesting. You know, what is it that these people are doing that I relate to, or I like, or, you know, and so like any good millennial, I just started tweeting editors. This was like 2013 when Twitter wasn't quite as awful as it is now. It's still pretty crazy. It's still the internet, but you know, it's Russian bots weren't really a thing. But I literally just tweeted at Jordan White, and I was like, hey, I want to learn about comic book editing. Will you talk to me? And it just so happened he was going to be at C2E2. This was April 2014, I think. And I was going to be there, and he sat down with me and talked. This is what a comic book editor does for an hour. And I left that convention knowing that's it. This is what I want to do. And I began putting together my own self-published projects because I knew I wasn't going to get an internship. I had already left college. So I'm going to create my own portfolio, just the same way a writer would create a writing portfolio or an artist would create an artist portfolio. I'm going to create a portfolio of projects that I produced, I edited, I put out there, I published, so that when, you know, opportunities to apply come up, I can show like, this is what I've done. I can do this, which a lot of people, editors don't do. Like, you know, your internship, when you're interning for Marvel or DC, you're not making comics. So when I ended up getting hired at Marvel as an assistant editor, there was like 4 other assistants who got hired in at the same time as me. Like, I was the only one who had actually made not alone a comic, but like multiple comics at that point. And so, you know, I had definitely the more unconventional route. I stayed in touch with Jordan throughout that summer. You know, this is the stuff I'm putting together. This is the work I'm doing. I ran into him again 6 months later at New York Comic Con that October. And I showed him, like, you know, I had a big Kickstarter going on at the time, and I had an ash can with me of a sample of the book. And, you know, he was hiring for an assistant at that time. And he asked, you know, would you ever be interested in moving to New York? I said, yes. 1 month later, I applied. Did interviews for 3 months with every person under the sun at Marvel. And then I moved to New York and began working for Marvel. So that's, you know, long story short, I made comics. I edited comics, you know, just like a writer, you write comics, you draw comics. Like, you want to make movies, you make a movie, you know, that's how you do it.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things that I think a lot of people underestimate is just like figuring out who's already doing the job that you want to do and then reaching out to them and networking. I mean, like when I was in grad school at Northwestern, like back in 2011,
Yeah.
I wanted to do stuff for AV Club, so I reached out to their city editor and arranged a meeting with her just to talk about what it was that she did, and I ended up lining up freelance gigs from that.
Yeah, I mean, so many opportunities or connections that I have made in my life have just been because I've shot my shot, you know? Like, so long as you're professional and not an asshole and not psycho or crazy and respectful of boundaries, fucking ask, I just recently, the day we're recording this, I don't know when this comes out, but it's Star Trek Day when we're recording this, and Star Trek 400 came out, and I have Will Wheaton, writing a comic and this, and how did I make that happen? I literally just reached out to Will Wheaton and was like, hey, I'm editing this comic, do you want to write on it? Like that's
Yeah.
It's a thing where ask the question, because you might get lucky, you might be surprised, and if they say no, then okay, you're in the same situation as you were, you're never going to be any worse off. So always, it never hurts to ask, just so long as you're not a dick about it.
Yeah, I mean the worst thing anyone's ever going to do is just tell you no. And like
Right.
it's one of the things that Todd McFarlane's pointed out to me a few times.
Yeah.
Just like he's got a stack of rejection letters from when he was trying to, become an artist at Marvel, and then now he is where he is.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, you're gonna get rejected. We're all gonna get rejected. And a lot of times, especially with artists and writers, I say this all the time. It's just keep doing the work, because I never want to say like, oh, you're absolutely ready, because you might not be ready, but like there are hundreds of people vying for the same job, and a lot of times, like I have a folder on my inbox of like, here are creators that I want to work with at some point, and it's people who are respectful, who send me their work, and I might not be able to hire you today, I might not be able to hire you tomorrow, I might not be able to hire you this year, but I might have something that comes up, and you weren't a dick, you reached out, I saved your shit, and then I'll reach out, like it's just there's a lot of bitterness and a lot of chip on their shoulders in this industry, who want to blame everything for why they're not Todd McFarlane, right?
Yeah.
And like Todd McFarlane is Todd McFarlane because he's good at what he does, but also he was prepared when the opportunity struck, right? And had he not been professional, had he not put in the work, had he not been ready when that editor reached out, then he wouldn't be Todd McFarlane, and that goes for everyone else.
Yeah, because I mean, just the raw talent in the first place is one thing, but like putting in the work to hone it and like figure out what's working at that time period and what people are interested in and maybe not getting is like the whole other. It's kind of like the difference between reaching that next level.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. Yeah, you look at comics and you look at the people who are working consistently, like year in, year out, and have decades long careers. And like, there's a reason for that. There's a reason, just as much that there was someone who, like, I was a hot shot one year and then suddenly disappeared. Well, there's a reason for that too. And I think it's very easy because we have what a lot of people would call like fun jobs, quote unquote fun jobs, and they are fun. It's essentially playing with action figures all day in a way, right?
Yeah.
But it's still work, and it's still a job, and there are days like you're gonna want to murder all your coworkers. Like that's just there are days like that. And like even with creators, like I was having a great conversation with Jim's up about this and Calgary Fan Expo earlier this year about how like you reach a certain level as a creator where if you're lucky, right, and editors have been calling year in year out, and you've been working consistently, and then all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, my projects are ending and I don't have anything lined up, and an editor hasn't reached out to me, where you realize like, oh, I have to still pitch, like it's still up to me to find work. And I think there's a lot of people who feel like entitled to be given projects or entitled to have their books sell just because they exist and have been working for so long. And that's just not how life works. Like it's still a job, it's still a product at the end of the day. Like it's a product that needs to be marketed, it needs to be sold, it needs to be created. You know, you still have bills to pay, you still need to find a job, you still have to hustle. It's, you know, like you want to be a creative, you want to work in the creative industry, it's still a hustle and you have to create the work. And so I think that's a thing that a lot of, you know, like I wish we were all billionaires and rock stars like people seem to think comics is, but it's not. It's a dirty, grimy job where we all just sit in front of our computers all day long like the rest of you.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about what a comic editor does? Because I know there's like some people who think that it's just, oh, you're just proofreading things, but there's so much more than that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely the biggest misconception. There's a lot of people who think that a comic editor is just like, I'm just there to make sure shit is spelled correctly, or that the requirement is to be a walking Wikipedia, which is not the case. Like Wikipedia exists so I don't have to be a Wikipedia, you know, like that's,
Yeah.
it helps to have a working knowledge of, you know, the properties you're working on. But like, I've always been the person, I write shit down or look shit up that is written down or able to be looked up so I can use that brain space to do other things, you know?
Yeah.
It serves no purpose to have, well, I know way too much about Star Wars for anyone, but like to know every single planet in the Galactic Alliance if I can just look that up, right? Like I could be using that brain space for something else, even though I probably could do that. But I would say, you know, next to that editors are just like these like cackling Disney mustache twirling villains who are just out there to like ruin stories and characters. Like there's a lot of ideas that editors are just there to be like, no, creator, you can't do the greatest story of all time. Wah, ha, 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 ha. Let me do my, what, you know, dance, monkey dance. That's not it. Like it's, you know, editors want the stories to be great just as much as anyone else does. And for anyone who wants to go on the internet and just shoot a tweet about how terrible editors are or how much we don't care or whatever, I challenge you to put out 20 books a month, working with over 100 different creators at the same time, you know, within multiple franchises and IPs, and aligning things constantly, like while dealing with human beings, you know, like that's the thing. Like I can only make a human being do what a human, you know, like I can give an artist all the time in the world to draw a book. That doesn't mean they're going to draw it, you know, and that doesn't mean they're going to write it. That doesn't mean they're going to turn it in time. That doesn't mean, you know, there's a lot. I often say being an editor is a glorified babysitter in a lot of ways. It's trying to get grown men who could be my father's age to do what it is they say they're gonna do. Who don't want to do it. That's not true. I love my creators, but yeah, there's a lot. It's part-time therapist. It is a project manager. It's a creative producer. It's a proofreader. It's a marketer. It's a copy editor. It's a lot. You do a lot of different things. But you're not sitting on top of a stack of cash going, ha 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 ha, let me ruin your comics.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the things that kind of like blew my mind, I guess maybe about a decade ago when I first started thinking about all of that as well, is like just having to figure out the consistency of art from like page to page. Like I can remember, I don't remember exactly what issue it was, but there's a Wolverine and the X-Men from Avengers versus X-Men, one of the tie-in issues to that, where there's a few pages before Rachel Gray is like in the infirmary with some other characters, and then a few pages later she's just in like this group and she's perfectly healthy and fine again, where it's just kind of like an oversight. But it, those things happen, people are people. um but I think some people just kind of like pick those little things out and make it out to be that like someone's terrible at their job because this little thing like slipped through the cracks. And there's a lot of other moving parts there that you're trying to keep track of. And like X-Men especially, there's like hundreds of characters in that
Yes.
franchise.
Right. And also, like, I'm like, we're human beings. Like, that's the thing at the end of the day. We're human beings and we're artists, like, is something gonna look exactly the same as this other artist drew it? No, and it shouldn't, it absolutely shouldn't. And also it's a comic book. Like, did you enjoy it? Was it fun? Great. But people want to get downtown to the nitty gritty detail, and it's like, okay, then why does who is counting Spider-Man's webbing in every single panel to make sure? Guarantee, well, I know that's not true, someone has probably done that, but your Todd McFarlane greatest Spider-Man run of all time, as a lot of people would say, I bet you pick any page, count his webbing on and it's going to be different. Like, Black Canary's fishnet going to be different every single panel. How asinine do we want to get with these requests of perfection? That's not sustainable. And any great television show or movie or whatever that you watch, there's goofs and errors and those all the time, always, because they're made by humans.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of just like a I guess for lack of a better term, like a cottage industry out of just picking things apart for the sake of it, and not because there's any like merit to the argument beyond just like having a negative opinion about a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we've gotten to an era of pop culture where we don't consume things to enjoy them. We consume them to have a hot take. And it's not cool to like things. It's not cool to like things. Because liking things just makes you, God, just such a corporate shill, or you don't get, and this is the big one, because we're in the age of, the internet, you don't get as much engagement on your posts if you like things. You gotta shoot something down and be edgy, and it's so exhausting. Why do we have to be edgy again about Spider-Man? Why do we have to be edgy about She-Hulk? Why do we have to be edgy about Star Wars? Like, it's fucking space wizards with laser swords. I'm sorry, that's cool no matter what. Like,
yeah. I mean, my favorite thing about the Star Wars wise, about the hate toward the sequel trilogy, for example, was that when it all came full circle to Rise of Skywalker, and you look back at the whole trilogy, it basically took a lot of the things that people complained were erased from like pre-Disney expanded universe, and then re-implemented them in a way that made sense with the ages that the original actors were at the time. And people still wanted to hate on it, even though it brought back these things that Star Wars fans were complaining Disney took away, like Palpatine returning, and the whole like plot line of him trying to like
he has children, no, exactly. Like, it's cool to hate on things, and it's exhausting. Just like things, or don't watch it. Done. Easy. So easy. I don't like Game of Thrones. You know what I'm not watching? The new show. Like,
yeah, I mean, I was like stoked since like fourth grade to finally see Palpatine's like clone planet with all of the where he was making all of his clone Palpatines that all deteriorated too fast. But it's a whole thing. So yeah, just getting back to cons again. How has that been for you? Because I think one of the things that stuck out for me, I went to C2E2 recently, and some of the things that I noticed in the panels is, well, in the panels and just talking to people too, you kind of get a nice little refresher after like a few years of that being gone, that the internet's not actually like real in a lot of cases.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. I'm such an introvert, and like I joked, I was like, oh, the pandemic's the best thing that ever happened to me, which is a horrible thing to say. It's not true, but like, getting to work from home and not have to like talk to strangers, I love. I love just like sitting in my cave and no one bothers me all day. It's my dream. But I did learn, very quickly that like, oh, but like conventions are where I socialize with people. That's where I get to, like a lot of my coworkers and my friends are all comics creators that live all over the world. And so, convention season is when we hang out. It's the friend time. It's the glorified, the summer of family reunions time and time and time again. And not having that for 2 years was really, really tough and really depressing. And I love traveling. And again, like conventions, I'm very lucky. I get to travel all over the world to do this. And so to have it back this year has been, a mix of like stressful and exhausting, but also amazing. Taking 2 years off of it, when I sat to pack for my first convention this year, it was just this panic of like, how did I do this? How did all of this fit in these tiny suitcases? How did I travel? How did any of this happen? And just, it's still like taking 2 years off of doing conventions because of a pandemic, and then suddenly finding yourself in a room full of 100,000 other people is a lot mentally and emotionally to deal with. So it's definitely been a evolution to get back to like quote unquote normal. But it's been really fun and really good, and getting to see everyone again and getting to interact with the fans and see the same people that, like I was just at Boston a couple weeks ago and ran into some people who I saw at Boston in 2019, and that was really good. And it's so nice to like see my colleagues again. And like San Diego, I got to meet, I started IDW during the pandemic, so at San Diego I got to meet my boss for the first time in person, even though I'd worked there for a year and a half. I got to meet my assistants, like all of those things. So that was pretty cool. I always joked, I was like, oh, we get to see how tall everyone is now, because you're so used to seeing each other like shoulders up. So that's always fun to see, oh, you're so tall, or you're so tiny, or you're middle.
Yeah. No, when you do meet and greets, do you find that people are generally they tend to be, a little bit more kind in person than they are on the internet when they've got that whole, wall of anonymity between everything?
I mean, yes, mostly because people who are assholes on the internet are cowards and would never say stuff to you in real life. Every once in a while I'll get a debate me bro want to come up, and one of my favorite interactions I've ever had was it was a Toronto Fan Expo 2019, and this dude came to my table and he was perfectly pleasant. Definitely wanted my take on the industry and my thoughts on, industry conspiracy bullshit, whatever. And I'll talk with anyone. Like I'll have a conversation, like so long as you're not an asshole. And after talking with him for like 15, 20 minutes, he was just like, you're like really normal. And I was like, okay. And he's like, no, I didn't think you would be so normal. And I was like, okay, like I don't know what you want me to do with that, but thanks, I guess. So yeah, it's internet's gonna internet, and people are gonna characterize you as much as they want to for their own entertainment. But for the, you know, like I have extremely supportive fans and extremely supportive colleagues in the industry. And so, you know, it's just really great to see them. I think the funniest thing for me is, you know, people will come up and like buy books or prints or art or just want to talk to me. But like 9 times out of 10, most people come up to my table and just go, I really like your Twitter. And that is the number one comment I get, so much that I think I want to have like a tip jar that's just like, you know, tip if you want me to keep tweeting. Everyone seems to like my Twitter. I don't know.
You know, my favorite story that I've heard anyone tell about meet and greets and things like that recently has been during one of the panels I went to at C2E2, CB Cebulski was talking about a different convention that he had been to recently, where a guy walked up to his table the first day and just proceeded to rattle off everything that Marvel had done wrong with Ghost Rider over the last 20 years, and how the Howard Mackie run was the last time that anything good was done with that character.
That's so long ago. I love Howard Mackie. That's so long ago.
And then like the next day though, CB sees the same guy coming back towards his table and he's like, oh, this again. But the guy sits down and then is like, thank you for listening to me yesterday. It was great to get that off of my chest. Here's everything that I've liked about the character for the last 20 years.
That's somewhat wholesome in a way.
It's like, it's not the direction that I thought that story was going to go when he started it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. Here's everything wrong and to reward you.
It's like I think sometimes some of these people just want to be heard, but then at the same time you also have to like remind them that it's comics. Like if you don't like what's currently going on with your favorite characters, someone else is going to come along in like a year or two and maybe do something totally different.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, a lot of people who enjoy comics and go to conventions tend to, you know, a lot of people are socially awkward and or just nervous, you know, and they don't, they self-identify with these characters in a way that, you know, could be seen as unhealthy, or just don't know how to communicate certain stuff, right? And they might be mad that something happened, or they might not understand it, or, you know, whatever. And and people just don't know how to communicate to another person. But yeah, it's or it's just a socially awkward of like, I want to be one of the cool kids and you're one of the cool kids, you get paid to do this, and I want to be one of the cool kids too, so I'm gonna quote unquote, this is all like a subconscious act, but I'm gonna quote unquote spout off everything I know to prove how cool I am and to prove how dedicated of a fan I am, you know, so you can validate me. That's a lot of the conversations I think like I observe or witness or you know, participate in. Is it's a lot of, you know, people who just want to be cool, and they what they makes them cool and what they're proud of is their fandom, their nerddom, and that's awesome. I love that. And they just want to be validated by the people in power and the people who make the books. It doesn't matter if you're Scott Snyder or if you're Joe Schmo who's doing their first book, like you're a cool person who makes this stuff. And so we want to feel special and we want to be validated and have the pat on the back that we've done our nerd cred and read everything, and get our pat on the back for it. And that's totally fine. Just don't be a dick about it.
yeah. I mean, I one of the things that I've always loved the most about cons is the thing that, you know, maybe you don't like that's going on in a book at the time is something that the next person, you know,
loves.
Like there was a Spider-Man panel that I went to not too long ago where this guy walks up to the microphone and he goes on this whole thing where it's like, why can't Peter be married? Spider-Man is about responsibility, and the ultimate responsibility that a man can have is being married and raising a child. And then I just hear like these two guys behind me, they're like, oh no, another one of these guys.
Yeah, and like it's a thing where I I've taken out a personal, every book might be someone's favorite book, right?
Yeah.
And I have people bring, I love doing signings because you never know what someone's going to bring you. And it's always like so lovely to see like what hidden treasures or Easter eggs or like something I haven't thought about, right? And years that I worked on, and then it's presented in front of me and I'm like, oh yeah, I worked on that. And I've witnessed this happen where like creators are just like, oh, I hated this, or oh, this is terrible, or oh, where they like shit on their own work, and I'm just like, they're bringing it to you to sign because they liked it. Like, don't tell a fan that they have shitty taste, like that's, especially when it's your work, like that's not great. So like, yeah, every comic is someone's favorite comic, and like even if it's your work that you don't like, fuck it, someone else does, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, like, it's, even if you think that it is your like not your best work, it's uplifting to hear someone say that it meant a lot to them either way, because it's kind of a reminder that like the stuff that you might not be the proudest of is still meaningful to someone. Like, it still had an impact.
Well, and we all look, why do we create? Is it egotistical on some level? Absolutely, it 100% is. But we create because we want people to connect to us. That is how we try to connect to the outside world. And so if someone is saying, hey, I connected with this, you did it, congrats. It doesn't matter if it's an Alex Ross or a Picasso, like it's gonna be someone's favorite, and that's why we do it.
Yeah, and speaking of creations, as someone who was editing the Star Wars titles when characters like Black Krrsantan was created, what is it like seeing him make the transition to live action now? Like, how stoked were you the first time
Oh
that
my
he
gosh,
stepped into frame on Boba Fett?
I like was speechless. It's it's really funny because the internet knows that I'm not Boba Fett's biggest fan. The character, like, he's fine. I think he's highly overrated.
Yeah, he
And
spends 5 minutes on screen in the first trilogy,
right,
stands around while everyone else does his work for him, and then accidentally gets killed by a temporarily blind
right. Look, does he have a badass costume? 100%. Did he do badass things? Absolutely not. But to each their own, like, you love the legend stories. I think that's great. I think there's a lot of potential in him, blah, blah, blah. That's not what we're here to talk. But I thought it was funny. Like, of course, the first character I worked on, would appear in live action in Boba Fett. Like, of course that would, of course that would happen. But I'll never forget. I was sitting in the living room, we were watching it, and my partner, like, he just, what, Wookie, like, he can't even like say, like, he knows it's my character. And I like looked up and I was just like so speechless and couldn't like mentally process it. Like, I teared up, I got emotional, like, he's one of my babies, and I remember tweeting out that day because I didn't want to spoil the episode the day it aired, but I remember like tweeting something like, today's Book of Boba Fett episode like had me tearing up. And like someone responded to like, oh my gosh, I know, me too, like that moment at the end where they saw the force tree or whatever, blah blah blah. And I was just like, you and I watched two very different episodes. Like, it's so cool though, it's so cool. And then when Casey Jones, the actor, or Carrie Jones, my bad, the actor, was at Star Wars Celebration, like they were talking about, what's it like bringing a character who originated in the comics to screen. And he like was talking about like how much research he did on the comics, and was like, he was really reading it and wanted to like create specific moments that they saw in the comics and the character and all of that. And it was just, it was so good.
Yeah, I mean, I was stoked as soon as I saw him on the screen, because he's one of my favorite characters from that run of the comics. And I'm really just kind of like looking forward to seeing who makes that jump next, whether it's like Aphra or like 000 or B21 or Santa.
100%. Yeah, it lays the groundwork for a lot of possibilities, and it gives me a lot of faith. Like, you know, you could easily say like, oh yeah, he's just a Wookiee, you know, how could they fuck that up? But like they had it, like they had his scar, they had, you know, all the details on his costume, like the whole, you know, thing with him is he is a Wookiee that was in the gladiatorial arena because he wanted to fucking fight and he wanted to fucking kill people and he is a badass. And like to see that, like, oh, this is a Wookiee throwing down in that second episode, like, that was everything I wanted. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what other characters we might see next, because who knows, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like even the whole just a Wookiee thing. That was like they got his disposition down. They, you know, what you mentioned about the gladiatorial thing, the disdain that he had for Trandoshans, which
Mm-hmm.
you'd think that like Wookiees in general probably have that anyways, but like especially him because he's, you know, in that gladiatorial position. But out of all of the characters that you worked on that could make the jump to live action, which one would you be most excited about at this point?
I mean, we all like just Star Wars or just
Yeah,
like in
Star
general.
Wars.
I mean, Aphra. I mean, obviously, like she's the one I most want to see because I think she has the most potential, but also is the one I'm most nervous about. Just because she is so precious to me, and like you could, she isn't a hero, and I could see like, you know, people wanting to make her be a hero, and she's not. She's not a good guy, she's not a bad guy, she's not great. I wouldn't trust her. But yeah, like that, she's definitely, but I also don't want them to like, oh, she's just a cameo, right? Like if she's going to show up, I want her to have a storyline. Like she could hold her own show. I truly believe that. And I don't know if that's something that Lucasfilm would necessarily dedicate to a relatively like unknown character. We'll see how the Acolyte does, right? Which that show is coming out, and that's a character that has never appeared in anything before. So we'll see how that show does. I think that's a great experimental testing ground to see how a show revolving around a character that has no ties to the original trilogy can do on screen. But I don't know. I think she has the world of potential. But I also think they could very easily fuck her up, and I don't know if I want to see that happen.
Yeah, because I know, you know, like bigger picture with things that you've been involved in, you were accidentally involved in the creation of Gwenpool, and like
Yeah.
that's another character that could easily be fucked up in the transition.
Yeah, no, she absolutely could. And I mean, we've already seen, you know, Gwenpool is very precious to me, very, very personal. And like, there's a lot of different perceptions of what she should quote unquote be internally at Marvel. And I don't agree with a lot of the internal direction for her that certain people there want. And so yeah, like that's, I don't know, like that. And also like her whole thing is like she understands how comic books works and comic book meta, like to a very like nth degree. So I don't know how that would like translate to live action. The fact that she can throw you out of a comic book panel, you know, or her thought balloons or whatever. They definitely could do it, but I think, I don't know. I would just be very, very curious how a director would translate that to something live action.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I guess kind of the easiest thing to highlight would be the way that the 80s Howard the Duck movie was handled,
Yeah.
where it just comes out kind of weird.
Yeah, and we don't want that. I feel like it would be like almost like a Roger Rabbit-esque type thing if it were to work, but I don't know. But yeah, I love Gwen. I think there's absolutely room for her in the MCU. Will she ever make it there? Who knows? I don't know. I'm not holding my breath, but I am ready to be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, so what are some things that you're working on right now at IDW that you're excited about, and what do you have coming up?
Yeah, so the big stuff at IDW right now is the new Star Trek line that we just announced at San Diego Comic-Con. We're relaunching the entire line with a new Star Trek #1 by Jackson Lansley, Colleen Ramon Rosanas, and Lee Lowridge. It comes out at the end of October. If you've never picked up a Star Trek comic in your life, this is the comic for you. If you've never read or watched a Star Trek show, this is the comic for you. This is a Star Trek comic for comic book readers. We're bringing in characters from all over Star Trek history, as well as introducing a bunch of brand new characters. The way I pitch it is Gore the God Butcher meets Star Trek. So there's all these like cosmic godly beings, and someone is going around and killing them, and that's not cool. We gotta stop that. So yeah, that's really exciting. Also on the Star Trek front, we have Lower Decks #1, which comes out in mid-September by Ryan Northrup and Chris Manolio. That is based off of the Lower Decks television show. Season 3 just premiered on Paramount Plus. It's funny and great, and I love it. So if you like funny, great things, check out Lower Decks. And then also Crashing #1, which is a creator-owned originals book from IDW's original line by Matthew Klein and Morgan Beam, Fiona Farrell, and Haas Atsmain Elhau, comes out middle of September as well. And it is Nurse Jackie meets a daredevil. It follows a doctor who is one of the specialists that can operate on superheroes while she's caught in a battle between, bad guys and good guys. When you're a doctor, you have to do no harm, and it doesn't matter who you're treating. You're supposed to save everyone. And so when you're saving superheroes and supervillains, they don't always like that. And she gets caught up in some fun drama with that. And by fun, I mean terrible and awful. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for it. And then you also mentioned you're working on Terror War with Saladin Ahmed.
Yeah, I'm on Terror War. I'm on all of Saladin Ahmed's Copper Bottle Substack comics. So that's Terror War by Dave Acosta, Jay Leistein, Walter Petrea, and then also there's Star Signs, also by Saladin, Megan Levins, and Kelly Fitzpatrick. So check those out. And then I have a plethora of image books I'm working on, most notably Bloodstained Teeth by Christian Ward and Patrick Reynolds, and Heather Moore, Time Before Time by Declan Shavley, Rory McConville, Chris O'Halloran, and then just going on sale at the end of this month, Old Dog #1 by Declan Shelby as well. And I'm sure I'm forgetting things. I work on a lot of comics. Oh, Rogues Gallery, that's the other one. Rogues Gallery by Hannah Rosemay and Justin Mason, also Image. So yes, I think that's everything. I don't know.
Well, thanks again for taking the time to chat today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was super fun.